Let's talk about it. Let's go deep. We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast. This is Dr. Dave Cornelius, your host. Hey, we're continuing our conversation of belonging and healing with my guest, Treacy from DNS Healing Center.
Woo!
Yay! So, the thing is, when we talk about sticks and stones can break my bones, but words could never harm me, to me, that's just partially true because words matter. I think words can be harmful, especially for people in need of belonging. And even if they don't have a need for belonging, I think words can be harmful. And so for me, the word that always shows up is the N word, which I think is a harmful word. And I said, no matter if it ends with A, I don't want to continue to prolong the use of a word that has been used to dehumanize my family and community. Other people may have a different opinion, but that's where I stand, and I'm sticking to it. What about you, Tracy? What word rubs you the wrong way?
That's what you feel, and you're sticking with it.
That's right. It's all about that.
I don't know if a word rubs me the wrong way. I think it's the intention behind the word that gets me, or who it's coming from. Because if somebody off the street calls me something or says something to me that I'm like, you know what, maybe they're having a bad day. I got a little bit more empathy and compassion for them. But if somebody who loves me and is part of my space where I feel like I belong, and they say something, that probably hits deeper than the N word. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just numb to it. I've heard it so many times. It's like, what the ever, It's just
right.
That's not my issue that you calling me that, or that you think that's your issue, right? So, but when someone says or has some meaning beside something that loves me, or say they love me, then that hurts. That affects me.
I could totally relate to that. So I was reading something from MIT recently, and in a study that they did, they were talking about, we crave relationships in the same region of the brain that we crave food, right? That's belonging. And we experience social exclusion in the same brain area that we experience physical pain. So what I'm thinking about is like, language is very powerful, and we could use it to divide us, unite us, and sharing the same language builds camaraderie between individuals, and it helps and supports a shared knowledge base and words used. So what language can be used to encourage more belonging, in your opinion?
That's a lot.
I know it is.
Right?
Yeah.
What came to my brain immediately is the language of love. And I guess that what I mean by that is when you, and we don't always do this because we're not always in a place to be conscious or mindful enough to do it, but speaking from the heart, as opposed to, waiting to hear what someone's saying, being present in the moment, all of those things that we talk about in mindfulness, being present in the moment, taking a breath before you respond, and then respond from a place of love. That's what came to mind for me. It makes, to me, it's that simple. And in order to respond from a place of love, we may have to feel that we've been loved and we are loved, so that we can give and receive it. And I guess that goes back to that belonging, right?
Yeah. And I love the fact that love is one of my favorite words, because my translation of it is very biblical in the sense that I'm talking about being patient and kind.
Yeah.
And if I could bring those two aspects of my humanity into the conversation, into the environment, the space, then, that's the work that we need to do to help to encourage belonging. Like, so for this year, my word for 2022 is kindness. right? And so that's going to be the mantra that I'll be chanting all the way through December 31st of 2022.
All right. So I can always remind you when you're being a butthead, I can go, kindness.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you could always bring it up.
Deal.
And I will work my way back into the great plan of being kind.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll probably poke you with the same thing. Do you have a word that you want to, claim for 2022?
I mean, if I had to, I haven't thought of it. I haven't thought of it in the context of having a word to cling to for the year. I don't know.
Not embrace.
I guess it's the other word, maybe patience.
Okay.
Because I think I may have been wired with an overabundance of patience. And that's something I always continue to have. Grace, grace and patience with others. So maybe patience for self.
Well, you need both, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just like you need love for self, to be able to love others. You need patience with oneself to be patient with others. Right? It's so interesting that we have to give something to ourselves so we know what the experience is like to give it to others if we can.
I mean, how else are we, right? And then that's the hardest thing for a lot of people, is to treat themselves with kindness and patience and grace. And our behaviors aren't always clean, and we respond unconsciously to a lot of things, and we don't know how that's affecting other people. And part of all of that is that being able to hear from other people how my actions affect you, with patience, with kindness, with all of those things.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, because we're human.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's always a journey and a thing.
Yeah, or probably we'll come up with an AI that's capable of doing all of that stuff consistently.
Oh,
I know I would get that response back from you.
Oh my God.
I knew I would.
Yeah. Patience. I'm having patience with you. Yes. Practicing patience.
So I want to, I've been thinking, the language of belonging to me is a tone of invitation. Yeah. Right, this voice of acceptance and maybe a sound of empathy. And I was just thinking about, some of the language that I may have used with my kids, and at times where I had to go back and apologize. Oh my God, I'm sorry that I've traumatized you, and maybe not make you feel like you belong. And so I'm going like, thinking about the language that I've used with my kids at time, and how also, because there's two sides of it, right? There's one side of it where we're helping them to create this stable sense of identity so that they become capable adults. And then there's the other side of it, was where I've used those language that I've had to go back and apologize. So I'm thinking about how would we introduce language that help people to find their way forward, right? Because to me, it's building a stable sense of identity, enabling them to become capable adults, is part of helping them to find a way forward. So what do you think?
Yeah, I want to just applaud what you said. And I think that's something that needs to be highlighted and needs to be validated, is that when we harm our children in some kind of way, when we say something that is hurtful, that we go back and apologize.
Yeah.
And as parents, we don't feel like we need to apologize sometimes because we're the parent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really difficult to hear that from somebody we love. And we've made so many, and word sacrifice has such a negative connotation, but like love sacrifices, we've made so many allowances in our lives to provide space for these beings that we're responsible for, that when we harm that being, it's so difficult to hear it from them, because they may not always have the language to share with us that they've been harmed, right? And it may come off and out of the way that we are not ready to hear it. And then we as parents go, we're the authority. You're not supposed to talk to me like that or something, that kind of garbage.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, wow, this little person's human, maybe little, but they're human. And to have that space of respect to be like, shoot, that was really jacked up what I said, or my response was not what I really meant, those kind of things, and really apologizing. So I applaud that, because that's not a regular thing for us to hear, that parents apologize to their children.
Yeah, well, and I would say sometimes in the type of family that we may have grown up in, and how our parents were affected by their upbringing. I grew up in the West Indies, and I keep telling people that you grew up in the West Indies. The language there could be harsh sometimes from parents, because and over time I've learned that it's a sense of a form of protection. Right. And because they're like, oh my God, we've come through this trauma of slavery and all of the other negative things that comes from that it's a sense of protectionism. Yeah. With some of the harsh language, that in a way they're thinking about how it helps to move you forward, right? Preparing you for the rough world.
Right. So that gets to back to the other part of that, and how do we support people to help them move forward?
Yeah.
And because of certain backgrounds of people and experiences and ancestral legacies, and how and because of, and I get, because you said slavery, I can go in that space, right? Because of the slave experience, there's also learned behaviors that we've gotten from being enslaved that we transfer into our systems in our life, with harsh language and corporal punishment and things like that.
Yeah.
So from that survival space, we feel we're really helping strengthen our offspring to get out into the world to be able to handle stuff, which is about that, right? That protectiveness. With all that loving stuff that comes with that needs to be equally as stressed as the other stuff. And I think that's where some of that, how I can help move, like if we're talking about our kids, right? How do I keep that discipline thing going, yet let them know that I love them no matter what, and I got their back. Yeah, this might sound a little hokey, and this is something that's just in pop culture that I'm going to throw in, is about the love languages, right? If you know your child's love language, then maybe that is a way to help them to begin to have ownership, to feel like they belong to themselves and they can belong in community. And that can maybe help support them to move forward.
Yeah, because one thing I always say to my son, right, is that, look, I've loved you from the day that I saw you being born, and I love you to this day. And I just give him a big hug and say, no matter what you do, no matter what, no matter what you say, just know that, I love you from the deepest core of who I am. So, and to me, just that in terms of wherever he's stuck, it helps to move him forward.
And I'm just going to add to that, because we live in such a world that's so visual, and no matter how you look, I'm going to love you. Right. Because physically we could, that really, and I guess I'm saying that more as a woman, because of how much pressure is put on how women are supposed to look, and how we, all the things that society puts onto us as attractive, right? And no matter how my child looks, I'm going to love them and let them know that. Yeah. Right. In addition to, as a parent, right, there's that fine line of, I really love you, but I want you to be healthy too. You know, we do
Yeah.
that thing in our brains, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I get that. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm glad you put your earrings on. So, you know, no matter how you look. So,
Exactly.
exactly. Right.
Exactly. That presentation. Yep.
Yeah.
And here I am plucking at my hair,
Yeah.
you
I hear
know,
you.
all the things. Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
So, in our workplace, you know, I think that shared language enables us to build a sustainable community that's welcoming. So I was thinking of quoting Adam Grant, and he said, a workplace is a community, a place where people bond around shared values, feel valued as human beings, and have a voice in decisions that affect them. So to me, where we're talking about culture, you know, and I'm saying, what are some ways that language helps to shape culture that enables belonging?
Yeah. So I was just going to backpedal when I said, no matter what you look like, I just want you to be healthy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
yeah.
had nothing to do with any type of anything except for psychological health. Right. All that, because you can look at a person and be like, oh, I don't know if you may look a little depressed or something.
Mm-hmm,
That's what I mean by look, nothing physical look. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or health. So the language to help shape, I mean, is that hokey bullshit, positive affirmations and
oh, come on,
saying things that'll gas somebody up sincerely though. Right. I mean, because are you blowing smoke up my ass? Are you gassing me up just to get something? Or is it really sincere?
Yeah.
Right. And since we're talking parent-child, it's important to let your children know that what they're good at, they're damn good at. Yep. And if it's in their pocket, it's in their pocket. Yep. Right. And not to doubt that. And even the things that they aren't good at, still freaking try them. That's okay. And it's okay to not be good at something. Right. Yeah.
Yep. It's all about what you learn. So as we're trying to shape this culture, right, with language, I think it's such an important aspect of, where we live, where we work, the whole community aspect of it. So I'm trying to figure out, what ways, what language could we use to help build up our culture in such a way that it's, we have that tone of acceptance and the tone of invitation and voice of acceptance, and there's empathy, that we walk in there and you go like, you have that that song from Friends, we want to go with everyone knows your name. I'm being hokey, right?
Oh, you culture. Mean no, that's not Friends. That's Cheers.
That's Cheers.
Yes,
yeah, you're right. Cheers. It's Cheers. That's right.
It's Cheers, right?
It's Cheers, right? You think of that song in your mind every time. I want to go with everyone knows my name, right? And so that is a language that's helping to shape a certain culture, right? In Cheers. So, how is that coming across in your world or in your mind of what language we could use to build that up more? Besides Norm sitting at the end of the bar, give me a beer.
Hey, Dave, that's what we're doing. You walk in and everybody says, Dave.
Yeah. Well, Trey.
We all know this inclusivity, right?
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, but I think not just the feeling of, but the language of, right? So you come in, you go like, Trey, what's going on? Big hugs, it's like lovely earrings.
Okay, enough with the earrings.
Come on.
And they don't match. I don't know if you know.
I didn't even know that.
Right. This one's smaller than this one because I lost each pair.
Now I can see. Now I can see.
I'm just wearing them together.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think there's some cool stuff going on. I was just thinking about, to Steve, the other day, and allowing your son's bandmates or friends to come hang out at your crib, right?
Yeah.
And to me, what was that language all about? I could just imagine what Steve was saying to them to shape this culture. Like, hey man, it's cool, you belong here. Right. I wonder what he was saying to them. Did he tell you?
Yeah, I don't even know if it was the language. It was the feeling. It was the vibe. It was it was they got here and no one was home. So we let them know how to get in the house. And young dude went and took a shower and set off the smoke alarm. It was hilarious, wow. Right?
Yeah.
So he texted us and he was like, I set off the smoke alarm, blah, blah, blah. And we both just responded laughing because it's something our son has done often in the past.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it was, I think it was just being able to for him to text us and be like, oh crap, this is what I did, or communicate with us instead of through our son.
Right.
In order to navigate how to do what they do. So it was, it was a vibe. It was our son, or both of our children know them even extending that to their friends was already in the language that you belong. It's accepted. It's all inclusive. And they were from all walks, shapes, textures of the world, right? And there were 6 of them.
6.
And there were 6. So bedrooms, basement, everything was sleeping quarters. And I cooked, all the meals. And
nice.
It was just really, I don't know if we said a whole lot to say. It was a feeling. It was, you come in my house and you make yourself at home.
That's beautiful, because that just walks us right into the next topic about the power of nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
Right. That there's a signal of love. They're talking about patience and kindness in an abundant way that is widely available to all. So all of the understanding, right?
Yeah.
That, that is said in silence need no words.
Right.
So when I'm thinking about nonverbal communication, let's talk about how does that signal that, you belong here, right? I mean, we kind of just touched upon it with those 6 beautiful, creative people.
Yeah.
Just the laughter, right? The laughter alone itself.
Oh my gosh, the conversation around the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time we've hosted some colleagues of his. So it's just kind of if our children refer them to us or they stay with us, then they know and we know that it's all good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so for sure.
The nonverbal, it's that openness. Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's also tone and pitch too, right? Because you guys didn't shriek at them. It probably was nice and calm. Oh, that's okay. Let me tell you how you could solve this.
Right. Well, no, I don't know if maybe I did some of that. So
no, I could hear you. What? You did what?
No. Well, I think in the past, I mean, this is something this muscle I've had to grow. Because in the past, my house, I was very protective of my house and pretty anal about how you move in my house and what happens within that space. And there are still some guidelines that I have, right?
Yeah, I know.
But not, shut up. But I'm not as I'm much more open now, not as rigid as I was, but I had to grow that muscle. And I think that's important to say, because if it doesn't come natural to us and it's a problem for other people, right?
Yeah.
We have to examine what's making us do those things, so that we decide if it's something we want to adjust or if we're going to really stay steadfast with it. And that is a nonverbal thing as well.
Yeah.
Right. Because if somebody comes into your space and you're nonverbal, and I do this with clients and a lot, we know the arm folding thing. Right? When we just fold our arms, and if I'm standing here with you and I'm doing this and we're talking, I am so disinterested, right? That's a nonverbal.
Yeah.
But if I'm here and I'm engaged and I'm there and I'm open to what you're saying, and as older people, I guess because all of this is multi-generational, we may need to be more mindful of listening instead of coming off as I know because I'm older.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
yeah.
that all that nonverbal stuff comes across in facial expressions and body language. And I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Roll your eyes, Tracy.
I
Love
have
it.
done that a lot with
Yes.
you. I will
Yes.
admit in our interactions.
Well, because we know each other so well that we get to be like who we are with
Right.
each other, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then how do you respond to that? Right. When I roll
Yeah.
my eyes, you roll yours back, or you're like,
Yeah.
whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So that, and there's that belonging, because we feel as if we belong in community with each other.
Yep.
We
Yep.
can do those things.
Yeah.
And then when there's conflict, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the beauty of belonging, right? Of being able to create that space.
Yeah.
And so looking at the flip side of that now, it's like, how about nonverbal communications that we make people feel like they don't belong?
Right.
That's another aspect. And I notice sometimes that, it's where I am not giving them my full self,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm partially in,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not fully in, and then
Mm-hmm.
my head is turned somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's some of those nonverbal communicational signals
Mm-hmm.
that, I'd like to hear more about, us just to explore. What are some of those things that really get people feel like, oh, geez, I better go somewhere else?
What does that make the person feel like? How does it make you feel when you walk into a space? How do you read if you belong in that space when you walk in? How do you read if you don't belong in that space when you walk in?
Well, I could tell you just from working in the tech space for a very long time, right? I mean, man, I used to live in Wisconsin, and being an African-American man from the Caribbean, walking into a space where I'm like the only Black person in this software company, you get the looks, you get the cold shoulders, you get all of that, and so you pick up on the vibe that, like, you really shouldn't be here. You don't belong here, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know what that's like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just having those experiences, not only in Wisconsin, but also in Chicago and California and all over the United States, that have had those experiences, because, it's just like, hey, man, what are you doing here? We don't have many of you doing the kind of work that we're doing, and this is really for us. So you don't really belong here. Right. So, yeah.
So what about the subtle, the more, not that that's not subtle,
Yeah.
but what about the times where you may feel as if you belong, and then something happens that makes you go, I guess I really don't.
Well, those subtle stuff are like crazy, right?
Yeah.
But and how it shows up. So it's interesting. Sometimes you're like, someone invites you into a social setting outside of work, right? Or and you're in their space, and then you hear the whispers. You kind of like inadvertently on the opposite side of a wall, and you hear the whispers that are coming at you about, like, what? Can't believe they feel this way about me. I thought we were cool. And you realize that we ain't cool, really.
Yeah.
So that shows up, or even in terms of withholding information in your workspace, right? Hoarding information for power, right? I mean, it's just another form of nonverbal communication that makes you feel that you don't belong. So yeah, I mean, it's many experiences with this.
Yeah. And how do you navigate that, right? How do you work with, because you have to build up some kind of armor to that so that it doesn't cripple you. so that you can keep moving forward, like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You to keep moving forward. How do you navigate that?
I think my sense of belonging growing up in a space where I was always encouraged,
Okay.
right? And where it was always encouraged to like, hey man, be the very best that you can be. And no matter what, the sticks and stones could break my bones, but words could never harm you, is kind of the language that I learned growing up.
Okay.
Right. So, hey man, go out there and be the very best. And it helps you to build up what I call the id, your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, and that id has been a great source of protection against some of that negativity that you may run into. Right. And so that's just the work that has happened over the years. I believe that if I'd grown up in a different space where I had to endure some of this negative harshness all my life, it would be different. But I grew up in a space where that wasn't the case. Right. I mean, sometimes I talk about knowing my what I would call like knowing Speedy George, who was a police officer, but
Yeah.
who would come and like and talk to us about different things when we were kids, knowing
Right.
the governors and people of color. That makes you feel that, hey, you know what, I could get to that level and I could be damn effective no matter what.
Yeah.
In spite of all of the negativity. So that has been helpful to prepare me to deal with the nonverbal communication, even the verbal communication that people want you to feel like you belong.
Yeah. So that's really good, because it sounds like from your experience, you've had people who look like you in power positions.
Yeah.
In important government, city, even company-wide positions because of the area you grew up in.
And I think even more important, your teachers.
And
right?
teachers, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, you think about it, a third of your day as a kid is spent with your teachers, right? And your peers. And I think that was essential. Even the first experiences in Catholic schools with those nuns, but you still also had a great mixture of what they call, lay teachers, right? Who are not, who were teaching in Catholic schools, that gave us a different sense of who we are, right?
That is really interesting, because I feel that parallel, because I went to Catholic grade schools and we had teachers that looked like me.
Yeah.
And it was like, when I hear about, because I was a college professor for many years, and one of the inquiries that I would ask my students, or one of the questions is, when was the first time you had a teacher of color? And for both Black and white students, and not just Black and white, but for many ethnic groups, I was their first teacher of color. And this is college, right? We're talking, you're an undergrad in college in freshman, sophomore year, first time you've come across a teacher of color.
And I could see that. I could see that, where, especially where you live, right?
Right.
Where you live makes a big difference, right? That centering space.
So that is really beautiful to hear, that you had that experience so that you could build and be able to flex that muscle when you came into spaces where you weren't quite accepted, or somebody was talking about you on the other side of whispers that you heard.
Yeah.
And I know this isn't, I don't know if we're getting into that, but I would be really curious to know what those whispers said, what was being said, right?
No, but it's interesting. Some of the whispers is like, I don't know who the hell he thinks he is. What, he's a blah, 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 the N word with ER instead of A, and blah, 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 blah about this person. I'm going like, what is that all about?
Wow.
But you build up your armor. You build up your armor to be able to sustain some of that. And it still could be harmful to you, right? Because over time, you keep getting all of that dumped on you. It starts to like chip away at your armor. If you don't have a space to replenish that place of belonging, it's really hard, right?
Right. Which goes back to that home life where we started, and how, and family of origin and the family you've made.
Yep.
in your world at that point, to belong there and to get that love. Because what we think, psychologically, is if the job is shit, that can be handled if everything else is going supportively for you.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to get into how much is good and how, what's well and what's not well, but supportive, right? If you've got supportive home life and relationships and all of that, and work is crap, it's a bit easier to balance. It's still a thing, but it's a bit easier to balance. But what we know is that many people have a shit work life and a shit home life.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that is a lot.
Well, they're not getting the goodness that they need, right? Which is the language of belonging, this tone of invitation, this voice of acceptance, and, the sounds of empathy that we need to sustain ourselves.
Right?
As
And
we're going through our journey.
Compassion from others, for yourself. There's and I think you talked about this, the levels of what those things are. Pity, something, empathy, and then compassion.
Because it goes from pity, I feel sorry for you, to sympathy, to I feel for you, to empathy, I feel with you, the compassion, I am here to help, right? And really walking through those levels of understanding, the experience and how we could support each other.
Right.
And knowing which I would say the emotions or actions, behaviors to introduce at this time for support.
Yeah. And I like support better than help. How can I support you instead of I'm here to help, right?
Yeah.
Because I think help makes it's a different connotation. Like, oh, you think I need help? That kind of thing for some people.
You're killing me, Tracy.
However you want me to support you, I'm there. Right.
Now I need to change my mantra, because my mantra is helping people to achieve their level of awesomeness. So I need to change helping to supporting. Oh man, wow.
There you go.
I'm in trouble. I even have it trademarked. So I need to go.
Shit. No, you don't have to change that.
I know I don't. I'm just thinking about it like, oh my God.
Shit. Oh crap. Yeah. No, it's just a different way to look at it. Right.
Yeah.
Help implies, I don't know, something else besides support for me. Right.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah. But what else anything else you would like to talk about the language of belonging before we close out our convo for today?
Yeah, no, I just really, really like this whole idea of belonging. And I think the more people define what that means for them, it may be easier to seek it out. And I always want people to go with themselves first. If you feel like you can be your best friend and that you would like to be around a person like you, that's good. If you feel like, oh God, I wouldn't want to hang out with me, I'm a whole lot. If that's the thing, start working on loving yourself more and belonging, feeling like you belong to who you are. Yeah.
Tracy, thank you so much. So, hey, thank you for listening to the Knowledge Show with Dr. Dave podcast. Our conversation today was about the language of belonging. Look, language is important to feel a sense of connection and belonging to oneself. Belonging is a basic human need. Yeah. It's an important part of who we are and how we could find identity. So I hope this learning experience prompted you to seek to discover more ways of finding your level of awesomeness. So the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast is streamed on Spotify, iTunes, Audible, and Google Play. I'm always going to give a shout out to my niece, Kayana Brow Hendrickson, for dropping the music for this podcast. Yeah. And this podcast is copywritten 2022 by Dr. Dave Cornelius and knowledgeshare.org. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode of Belonging and Healing as we continue to share our stories and experiences.
Let's talk about talk. Let's go deep. We all have have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.